The building still breathes, though its lungs are filled with dust. Every door groans like it remembers being opened by someone who never came back. Windows, veiled in spider silk, stare out into a field where winter forgot to die. The air tastes of iron and old rain. Light falls in narrow slits, dissecting the gloom into trembling veins of gold. Detective Elias Wren moves through it like a trespasser inside his own mind. Each step stirs the silence into shape, a hush so absolute it seems to listen. The walls carry the sound of his breath, thin and uneven, as though afraid to disturb the ghosts that linger between the peeling wallpaper and the rot. This was the last place she was seen. Lila Harrow, 23 years old. A florist who arranged funerals like she understood the language of endings. Her name had lived on the city's tongue like a splinter whispered, then forgotten. But now, after 44 years, someone found what shouldn't have surfaced. A child's porcelain hand, cracked and pale, buried beneath the churchyard elm. Elias kneels by the broken pew where her photograph once sat. The candlelight flickers over his fingers, trembles on the edge of memory. He had been a boy when she vanished, his mother's friend, her laughter like a melody that outlasted every room she entered. He remembers her perfume, lilac and rain, how it clung to his mother's coat long after she stopped visiting. Outside, the wind murmurs through the ruins. Inside, the world contracts to the shape of a name written in dust. Layla. 2. Old Disappearance resurfaces after discovery of symbolic object. The object lies sealed in a plastic evidence bag, a porcelain hand, its fingers curled as though in prayer or warning. Tiny fractures web across its surface like veins of frost. The faint trace of blue paint lingers on the nails, delicate and precise, the same shade of polish Lila was known to wear. Found 3 feet under, the forensics officer mutters, but his words dissolve into the hum of fluorescent lights. Elias barely nods. The room feels submerged, the air thick with chlorine and ghosts. On the wall, the cold case board leans, yellowed reports, photographs pinned with rusted tacks, her face looking out through decades of silence. In the photograph, she stands by her shop window, holding a bouquet of white lilies. The reflection in the glass shows someone else, blurred, distant, a shadow of the photographer. Elias stares too long. The longer he looks, the more that figure begins to resemble him. He tells himself it's coincidence, that memory lies. But something about the porcelain hand, its fragility, its prayer-like posture, feels personal. He dreams that night of a room filled with flowers, each bloom whispering his name. The petals close in, smothering the air, and beneath them he hears her laugh, soft, broken, carried through water. In the morning he drives to the churchyard. The soil is turned, raw and unsettled. A crow watches from the headstone, its eyes like drops of oil. Elias kneels again, touches the disturbed earth. "I'll find you," he whispers. The wind answers, carrying the scent of lilac. 3 investigator shows personal involvement, mixing duty with obsession. The case becomes a mirror. Every lead, every face, every recorded voice reflects something he refuses to name. His apartment walls are lined with her images now, copies from the archive, blurry enlargements, notes scrawled in the margins like prayers disguised as evidence. He stops sleeping. The ticking of the clock becomes a heartbeat he can't silence. In the dim light of early morning, he listens to old tapes, witness interviews, static-laced confessions. On one recording, his mother's voice drifts faintly in the background, laughing. "Lila always said the flowers remember everything." The words loop through him. He begins to visit her old shop, now a hollow space filled with wilted air. Dust outlines the shapes of forgotten vases. The counter bears a single pressed petal, brittle, translucent, as if waiting for his touch. When his partner asks if he's all right, he only nods. The truth is less a confession than an infection. He feels her everywhere, in the rust of the hinges, the hum of the refrigerator light, the reflection of his own eyes in the dark window. One evening he sees her again, not in memory but in motion, fleeting at the edge of his vision, stepping into the glow of a street lamp before dissolving into rain. He runs outside, but the street is empty. Only the scent remains. He clutches the porcelain hand in his coat pocket like a talisman, its cold surface biting into his palm. Somewhere deep inside, he understands he's not solving her murder. He's unearthing himself. The case, like memory, was never really closed. It was buried, waiting for him to return. They arrive in fragments, like photographs caught halfway through the chemicals, faces blooming, then fading, then blooming again. The first is Ruth Wren, Elias' mother, who exists now only as a weather pattern in his apartment. The scent of starch and cigarette smoke, the click of her bracelets when she'd straighten his collar, the sudden hush when the phone would ring and she would say, "Not now, Eli." She knew Lila long before the newspapers learned to spell her name. They met over wreaths and wake flowers, arranging tenderness into temporary architecture. Ruth used to bring him to the shop, sit him on a stool, and teach him how meanings lived inside stems. Rosemary for remembrance, foxglove for insincerity, blue forget-me-nots like secrets that chose to remain. There is Father Mallory, too, whose age sits on his shoulders like a coat too heavy to remove. His hearing is almost gone, so he answers the silences instead. In the vestry, his hands move in small, nervous circles, polishing silver not to make it shine but to keep it moving. He remembers Lila's last confession, though he cannot say why memory has the texture of fog. "She was afraid," he murmurs, voice like paper, "but not of a person, of a room." Elias watches his mouth form the word and thinks about rooms that learn the shape of their occupants, rooms that develop appetites. He does not ask which room. He already knows. Grace Harrow arrives under gray light, carrying a cardboard box taped with grief. Lila's younger sister, hair cut blunt as a broken promise. She sets the box on the table and removes a stack of receipts, a ribbon, 3 photographs that have learned to curl inward. "I kept these out of spite," she says, half a whisper. Spite is warmer than mourning. Her mouth tries a smile that doesn't land. In one photo, Lila holds a bouquet of cornflowers and ivy. In the reflection of the shop window, there is that same blurred figure, that misprinted ghost Elias cannot stop turning into himself. He looks away. His partner, Devon Hale, stands in the doorway like an apology. Devon speaks in clauses that never quite finish. "Elias, you look, this case we need to." The rest is a hand on a shoulder. Devon has seen men fall into their own investigations and come out with pieces missing. He leaves a thermos of coffee and a note, "Sleep." Elias pockets the note as though it were contraband. The last visitor is the town itself, a congregation of porches sagging into dirt, children's chalk outlines on sidewalks washed to pale hieroglyphs, the train that passes at 3:11 every morning like a blade drawn slow. Everyone remembers something, and everything they remember contradicts the next recollection by a degree so small it feels like conspiracy. She laughed too loud. She stayed too late. She was seen with a man in a navy coat. No, it was gray. The chorus becomes a tide that drags Elias sideways. A memory rises without permission. A summer noon, the florist bell trembling, the child Elias reaching toward a porcelain doll displayed beside the register. The doll's hand was raised, as if to ask a question none of them could hear. Lila's palm covering his, soft and firm. "Careful, little bird," she said. "Things break when they're not ready to be held." The words return with the weight of omen. That evening, Grace lingers by the doorway and watches him map pins on the wall. Her voice threads through the hum of the cheap lamp. Did you know her? Elias hesitates. The honest answer is a house with lights on in only one room. My mother did, he says. Grace studies his face as if reading a weather report. Then you know this isn't about finding a person, she whispers. It's about finding the moment a person stops being themselves. Father Mallory sends him away with a rosary that smells of cedar and nicotine, the beads worn thin by thumbs that begged for outcomes. Sometimes mercy is not the same as truth, the priest starts, then stops, the sentence falling without a sound. Devon leaves him a stack of files trapped under a paperweight shaped like a pressed camellia, the flower of longing. Ruth's voice sneaks in with the draft from the window. Close the curtains, Eli. You let the night see too much. In the hush that follows, Elias understands that the case has become a seance performed by the living. Each participant calls Lila back in a different shape. Sister, parishioner, confidant, rumor. He alone conjures her as gravity, the force drawing his steps along grooves carved decades ago. When he sleeps, he dreams of the church as a ribcage and of himself as breath. He wakes with fingernail crescents in his palms, the rosary tangled like fishing line. The box Grace brought waits on his table, as patient as the dark. Inside, something rustles, not a sound but the idea of one, and he thinks how the past is not dead, only poorly buried, and the shovel is his name. 5. Symbolic clues, photos, diary, patterns build intellectual intrigue. The box opens like a throat clearing. Paper exhales its autumn smell. He lays the contents on the table, a customer ledger spotted with age, a narrow, ribbon-bound notebook, 3 photographs, a strip of blue nail polish worn down to a crescent moon, a florist's card imprinted with an address, and faintly, a thumbprint that could be anyone's or an accusation. The notebook is the kind the city stationers used to sell in stacks near the till, narrow-ruled, sugar-white, elastic-tired with years. On the first page, Harrow and Wren floral, orders and notes. The ampersand knocks the wind from him. He knows it is business language. He knows it could be coincidence. Still, the insect of guilt buzzes at the glass. He reads the entries the way one reads fever, sideways, careful not to touch the heat. August 12, Mrs. Mallory, dahlias white. August 14, for R, that's it. A single initial written with a firm downstroke that bites the page. August 15, funeral spray for child, use gentians, I am lost, then crossed out and replaced with white lilies, purity. August 16, no deliveries after dusk. Notes become code, becomes mood. Lila is composing not arrangements but weather. He spreads the photographs beneath a lamp that paints every scratch with mercy. In one, Lila poses with her sister before the shop, summer bleeding through the emulsion. The reflection shows a boy on a stool, an elbow on the counter, his face a smear of movement, as if the camera were unwilling to insist he was there. In another, a bouquet lies on newsprint, foxglove, lavender, cornflower, ivy. He consults the ledger. The same day, an order for Ruth W. Sympathy, keep it gentle. The last photograph is the shop interior, the counter, the porcelain doll, the register, a door in the back that wisps open as if reaching a hand. The doll's lifted palm mirrors the porcelain fragment in his pocket. The ribbon-bound notebook turns brittle as he turns the pages. Between recipes for wreaths and prices for corsages, Lila has tucked margins with floriography, the Victorian dictionary of petals his mother once treated as gospel. Ivy, fidelity and confinement. Lavender, distrust. Foxglove, insincerity, dangers of ambition. Cornflower, hope in grief. Her script grows smaller near the end as though pressed by a presence leaning over her shoulder. He feels that presence too, a second shadow behind his own. Patterns surface like oil through water, orders clustered on Thursdays, then a gap, deliveries avoiding one neighborhood entirely, a series of bouquets to the church marked for the choir room only, all containing the same quartet of stems. He pins a map to his wall and begins to place petals where addresses would go, a herbarium of a vanished city. Lines connect like veins to a heart that might be the church, might be the shop, might be himself. Devon watches him from the doorway and says nothing. The whiteboard marker squeaks like a mouse as Elias writes, R. He visits the station archives and pulls every photograph from the summer of 1981 that contains a shop window. Glass is a diary that refuses to confess, yet it records. In one image, a bus idles across from Harrow and Wren. The center panel of the bus door gives back the street. An oiled smear of clouds, the crown of the elm, the black silhouette of a woman lifting a hand. He magnifies until the image disintegrates into weather. He hears Ruth's bracelets again, hears her say, "Don't look too close, Eli, pictures bite." There is a pattern in the ledger numbers that at first feels like superstition. Every order to the choir room ends with .81, a habit perhaps of rounding or the unconscious marking of a year. He checks receipts from other shops. None replicate this arithmetic tick. On a hunch, he adds the digits of each choir room order. 1 plus 2 plus 5 plus 0, 8 plus 1, 3 plus 6 plus 0, 8 plus 1, lazy math. But the sums repeat 18, 18, 18. In the language of flowers, 18 can be pronounced chai life, or, in some numerologies, bondage disguised as devotion. He writes 18 above the choir room on his map and circles it violently. The circle looks like a bruise. The diary's last pages refuse to yield to his hands. They stick like scabbed skin. He breathes, peels. The final entry is not words but petals pressed flat until their colors ghosted away. He holds the page to the light and reads it like a transparency. Ivy, foxglove, lavender, cornflower, the same quartet. A message repeated until only the ritual remains. At the bottom edge, a dotted line of impressions suggests that a letter once lived here, torn out with care or fury. He imagines Lila writing to someone with an initial, someone who spoke with his mother on the phone at hours that smelled of gin and apology. He returns to Father Mallory with the notebook. The priest closes his eyes when he touches it as if it were hot. She wanted absolution for a promise, he says, air barely moving. But absolution is for acts, not for thoughts. She believed she had already done the unforgivable by imagining it. Elias waits. Imagining what? He asks. The priest's mouth opens, then closes. Change, he says at last, unsure. The kind that takes you out of a room you swore you'd stay in. The beads click in his pocket like teeth. Night shifts its weight. In his apartment, the mapped petals form a fossil of intention. The porcelain fragment on his desk listens. He paints the quartet on an index card, writes their meanings beneath in a cramped hand. He feels not closer to Lila but nearer to a mirror in which his mother stands behind him, adjusting his collar, telling him to be kind to the truth, even when the truth refuses to be kind back. Outside, the train writes its thin line across 3:11 a.m., and the city moves one deliberate inch into the past. 6. Twist questions investigators' perception, blurring truth and delusion. It begins with the photograph that refuses to settle. He has taken it from the evidence board, pinned it above his bed as if sleep might domesticate it. The reflection in the shop window, the boy shaped like an erasure, keeps changing when he isn't looking. Not truly changing, that would be magic, rearranging itself inside him. One morning he wakes and knows with the rude certainty of a fever breaking. He is not simply seeing himself in the glass. He is remembering being behind the glass. The boy in the reflection is inside the shop, not on the street. A shift of angle, a tilt of world. Memory grows color the way bruises do. He sees Ruth and Lila arguing softly while he plays with the ribbon spools. Hears his mother say, "You cannot keep making bouquets that speak in codes, Lee. People don't want puzzles at funerals." Lila, it's not for them to read. The porcelain doll on the counter between them, its raised hand frozen in a warning Elias misfiles as greeting. He remembers the blue polish on Lila's thumbnail smudged. He remembers the back room door yawning, the choir room arrangements lined like little altars. The boy himself, slipping from the stool when the bell rings, chasing the wind into the back room because the wind smells like rain and lilac, and the idea of leaving. What he finds in the room is not a body or a man, it is a mirror. A literal one, tall and cheap, leaned against the wall, but the mind's mirror is worse. In his present apartment, the map's circles look like nooses. The quartet of flowers spells distrust, confinement, danger wrapped in the corsage of hope. He has been reading the diary as a clue map to a killer. What if it is a map out? What if Lila was arranging a goodbye elaborate enough to be mistaken for an omen? Devon finds him sitting on the floor amid photographs, eyes glassed. Elias. The syllables pull like stitches. You're bleeding. He looks down, a crescent cut on his palm from the porcelain shard. He does not remember picking it up. I think I planted this, he murmurs, the honesty lodged like a fishbone. Devon kneels, checks his hand, wraps it with gauze. You didn't, Devon says, gentle, but you wanted to. That matters in here. A touch to the temple. Less in here. A tap to the chest. Elias closes his eyes. The world tilts again. He drives to the church alone, the rosary rattling like a verdict. The choir room is smaller than memory, thin windows tamping daylight into gray. He stands where the bouquets would have sat and imagines Lila arranging them. Ivy curling toward the sill, foxglove bells sly as poison, lavender brushed to calm a room that betrayed its purpose. He sees his mother at the back of the nave, whispering with Father Mallory after Mass, bracelets ticking the seconds of a decision. He cannot hear words, only the pressure of them. A thought arrives uninvited. Perhaps Lila's disappearance was an act of devotion to someone else's life. Not an abduction, not a murder. An escape that required witnesses to misread it, and the city obliged. But then what of the porcelain hand? What of the torn letter? In the corner, a closet door yields to his touch. Inside, a stack of stage prop boxes from some long-ago pageant, Bethlehem, stamped in red. He opens the lid of one and finds porcelain limbs wrapped in tissue like sleeping bones. The hand in his pocket grows heavier. He is not discovering evidence. He is discovering props. The horror is not that he missed the clue, but that he authored it in his hunger to find a clue that matched the story he needed. He trembles, then laughs, a dry, broken sound that startles the quiet into a scatter of dust motes. In that dust, he sees the outline of a boy lifting a doll's hand because it felt like permission. He sees a young woman cutting her thumb on a tin of polish, smearing blue onto his knuckle as she presses the doll back. Careful, little bird. The line between memory and fantasy dissolves like sugar in rain. The case tilts into himself. His mother's voice teaching him to decode flowers. His adult mind using the alphabet to write a guilt he can finally read. When he steps into daylight, the newspapers have already found the word arrest. A man from that summer, a janitor with a record of petty theft and a mouth that stumbles, has been taken in after a neighbor recalled a coat that might have been navy or gray. Elias hears the word and feels nothing. He thinks of stage props, of stories that satisfy the public appetite for endings. He thinks of Lila, who might have stood in front of a cheap mirror with blue nails and decided to become a future that did not include any of them. He thinks, I am not an investigator of crimes. I am an investigator of my inability to forgive what leaves me. Devon's voice follows him down the steps. This is good, Elias, it's something. He doesn't answer. The twist is not that the suspect is wrong or right. The twist is that the truth has adopted his face in the window and refuses to give it back. He slips the porcelain hand into the churchyard soil where the elm's roots know all the names, presses it down until the earth takes it from him. For a moment, the ground feels like a pulse. Then it is only ground again, and he is only a man standing where a story ends and refuses to end. 7. Ending feels haunting and unresolved. truth brings no peace. The headlines move like weather fronts, hot with certainty, then cooling in the late editions, then revised under the weight of correction. Arrest shocks community. New witness emerges. Clerk recants. By dusk, the town has begun its ritual of forgetting with fresh vocabulary. The janitor's face is printed beside Lila's, obedience to a narrative that requires twins, victim and villain, cause and closure. Elias watches the pages in the vending machine tremble behind glass, each sheet another pane he cannot break without bleeding. He does not put in a coin. He has already spent himself. At his mother's grave, the wind combs the grass into partings that refuse to hold. The sky, an old bruise, fails to choose a color. He places a small bouquet at the stone: cornflower, lavender, ivy, foxglove, the quartet that has followed him like a dog that knows only one trick. He does not tie a ribbon. He does not leave a card. He stands with his hands in his pockets until the cold persuades him to move. "I learned your language," he tells the stone, a confession and an accusation. "I just didn't know it would speak back in my voice." The stone does what stones do, keeps its counsel. Grace meets him outside the florist's dark storefront. Inside, the shelves wait like rib bones. "They'll keep the arrest," she says, not looking at him. "People need to believe they're safe from the past." He nods. They are twins for a moment, their reflections laced into the window's night. "I don't think she died the way they think," he says, almost to himself. Grace closes her eyes. "I don't think she lived the way they think," she answers. "Either way, we've been wrong about her for longer than we were ever right." Their silence carries the weight of a truce neither can sign. Father Mallory's rosary hangs from the rearview mirror of his parked car, beads tapping the windshield with a secular patience. He leaves it there as a superstition he doesn't believe in, a chain that insists its only function is to measure distance between one bead and the next. He drives to the church, parks beneath the elm. The choir room is locked now, the door sealed with blue tape that looks almost festive. He does not try the handle. He sits on the steps and listens to the building breathe. Elias, Devon's shoes on stone, a pause. "It's over." The investigator in him nods, the boy in him shakes his head. "No," he says, not unkindly, "it's completed." Devon's breath leaves in a small white cloud. "That's the same thing." Elias looks at the cloud until it thins. Not to the people who have to live after. The conversation could keep going, but they let it stop there, as if words themselves risk making a mess the night will have to mop. Devon sits. They share the kind of silence that counts as friendship. Two men agreeing not to fill the air with anything that cannot carry its own weight. He dreams again that night, not of the investigation, but of the shop bell chiming in an empty room. Light moves across the counter. The porcelain doll raises its hand, and from somewhere a woman laughs, not cruelly, not happily, but with the calm of someone who has placed every object exactly where it will be found by someone else she will never see again. In the dream, Elias doesn't chase the sound. He stands still and lets it pass over him like a weather system. When he wakes, the apartment is quiet in a way that feels earned. The map on the wall is a fossil now, not a wound. The city keeps its train at 3:11. The elm keeps its roots. The newspaper keeps its certainty until the next certainty arrives. The janitor keeps his cell. Grace keeps the keys to a shop she may never open. Father Mallory keeps his parish in a palm that trembles. Devon keeps showing up with coffee he forgets to drink. Elias keeps walking the distance between what is known and what is felt, which is to say he keeps being human. On his table, the index card with the quartet sits under a glass. He slides it free, turns it over. On the back, in an older hand, his mother's, there is a note from a distant year. For Lee, blue for bravery, green for faith, white for starts, bells for warnings. Come by after the evening train. He doesn't know how the card came to be in his house. He doesn't know if the note is a memory or a wish. He places it back under glass. He does not tell anyone. When he returns to the churchyard, he stands where he pressed the porcelain hand into the earth. The soil has settled, cinched its lips closed. He feels foolish for having believed that burial is a form of speech. He whispers anyway, "Careful, little bird." The words arrive without their owner, but they do not feel empty. They feel like weather. He waits until the wind answers with an ordinary rustle and thinks. The case is solved because a story was chosen and made to fit. The truth remains because the heart refuses to be professional. He walks home slowly. At the crosswalk, the red hand blinks, then steadies, then finally releases him. Somewhere, a porch light clicks on for no one. Somewhere, the last edition hits a stoop and lies on its back like a stunned fish. He opens his door, turns on no lights, and sits in the dark long enough to see the shapes learn their names. The quiet does not comfort him. It merely agrees to share the room. In time, he will sleep. Not well, not badly, just enough to carry him to morning, when the train will draw its thin line through a new day. And he will read the line the way one reads a scar. Not as proof of healing, but as a place the body learned to say nothing and keep going.